All right, here we go. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for joining. This is always a special occasion. The Shabbat HaGadol Shiur, the Shabbat prior to Pesach, is a traditional occasion for Torah scholarship. Something that I've really always enjoyed since coming to Anshe Shalom. This year it's moved online. It's moved back a week. Okay, so because Shabbat HaGadol, the Shabbat prior to Pesach, is also Erev Pesach, which is explains the timing and also explains it's also our topic. So I want to so we'll jump right in. I'm going to share the source sheet with you in the chat. So you'll all have a link to the you'll all have a link to the source sheet in the chat, and you can do it. And it's a live digital source sheet. You can do whatever you want with it, and meaning all the links are live and you can follow up and pursue. So there it is. And I'll also share my screen so you can follow along with me if that's easier. Okay, so whatever you want. And I just say it's a little bit of a, I'd say it's a little bit of a large group for just blurting out questions. But the truth is, if I don't know, like, you can try it. If you have a question, certainly something you don't understand, please unmute yourself and ask the question. Otherwise, keep yourself on mute. And you can also use the chat function, and I will try to monitor it. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and I'll give an overview. So here we go. Okay, okay. Here's the outline of what we're going to accomplish. So first, I was going to overview some practical guidance for Erev Pesach that occurs on Shabbat. Okay, this is happening a week from tomorrow. It'll be Erev Pesach and Shabbat all on the same day, and I just want to make sure that everyone has just basic information of how to do this. I'll just go over that. I'm going to spend a few minutes at the beginning just with some basic overview. The goal of this is not to be fully comprehensive, but that if you ask questions or email me questions, if I don't know the answer, which is often the case, I'll have time to research them and get back to you in a timely fashion. Okay, so the point is, we're going to cover a whole bunch of topics now. You'll ask me questions and I'll have time to research the answer and get back to you in time for next Shabbat. So that's part one. Part two, I want to look a little bit about some of the history of Erev Pesach that occurs on Shabbat. There was a very sort of a famous episode in Jewish history that involved the coinciding of Erev Pesach and Shabbat. And then I want to say some final words about this year in particular and what this year can what this year can add in that regard, or what the resonances of this coinciding of Erev Pesach and Shabbat, what it can tell us or what it can evoke for us this year in particular. So let's go through overview. Okay, again, this please, if there are questions, put them in the chat, and if I have time to answer them now, I will, and if I don't, it'll be I'll get back to you. Okay, but let's try to generate some questions. So here, first step, okay, sale of chametz. When are we going to sell our chametz? Normally, we sell our chametz on Erev Pesach. That's typically when the sale takes place, right before the prohibition of owning chametz kicks in on Erev Pesach. That's when we arrange a sale to a Gentile, and so that we don't own. There's no Jew owning chametz over Pesach. But how can we do that? We can't conduct a sale. We can't do that on Shabbat. So how do we do this? And if we sell it on early, then how do we deal with Shabbat? So there are a couple of possibilities. One is the sale takes place, but the transactions take place. The kinyanim, the modes of conveyance, take place before Shabbat, with a stipulation that it will the sale will take effect, will kick in Shabbat morning, right before the prohibition of owning chametz begins. So you can have all your leftovers. You can just sort of put it in the closet, close the door, and close the door right before whatever time it is on Saturday morning, and you're all set. Others don't like the idea of a sale that takes effect on Shabbat, and they say no, the sale is fully entered into on Friday before Shabbat begins, and therefore you don't have the option of adding extra chametz into your chametz cupboard that you're going to sell on Friday night or Saturday morning. You got to get it all in there Thursday night, early Friday morning, and then whatever you eat on Shabbat, when it's permissible to eat an own chametz, you do. Whatever you don't has to be discarded. This is what's happening for us. The CRC is Chicago Rabbinical Council Beitzin is arranging the sale for us this year. This is sort of part of our COVID safety protocols. We're not convening in person and the small base measures to do the sale ourselves. So they're selling for dozens of communities all across North America. They're doing ours. It's going to take place on Friday. Okay, search for chametz. Normally, chametz is searched for. We rid our homes of chametz. We go through our homes looking for chametz on the night before Erev Pesach, which would typically be this year, the night before Erev Pesach, right? The Gemara says, this is if you've learned Daf Yomi or have any other reason to learn Masechet Pesachim begins, or Arba Asar, we begin searching for chametz the evening prior to the 14th of Nisan, which this year would be Friday night. You can't do the search for chametz on Friday night because you're supposed to go around with a candle and look in all the nooks and crannies, and that's not like an appropriate Shabbos activity. So how do we do it? So the answer is we do it one night before. So the search for chametz takes place Thursday night this year, and then which is, I guess, a day earlier than it would typically be done. We can still say the bracha, the blessing on the mitzvah of removing chametz from our homes. We say that bracha on Thursday night prior to the search. We do the search, then we recite the kol chamira, that nullification of chametz, which nullifies and cancels all the chametz that we might not know about in any location where it may be, with the exception of the chametz we do know about that we're intentionally not destroying, that we're going to use over the course of Shabbat. Okay, so that's this, similar to what we would do on the night before Erev Pesach. We're doing it this year one day earlier on Thursday night, the 25th. What do we burn chametz? We typically burn chametz on Erev Pesach. Can't burn this year on Erev Pesach because it's Shabbat. So what do we do? So you could destroy your chametz on Shabbat in other means, right? You could put it in the garbage. You could have somebody take it away. You could flush it down the toilet. But we do want to preserve this practice of doing some burning. It's, this is maybe a topic for another year. Why we burn this? The Mishnah records a machloket between the Tanaim whether or not chametz has to be burned or whether it can be destroyed and eradicated in any method. The conclusion is that chametz can be destroyed in any method, but we still burn it anyway. So it's why are we burning it if it's not really necessary to burn chametz? But we want to accommodate that position, that ancient position, that the best way to get rid of chametz is by burning it. So that's what we do it every year. This year we're going to do it on Friday morning. Okay, and that's something we can do with it's like a fine socially distanced activity. We'll have a bonfire in the shul parking lot as we do most years, but it'll be Friday instead of Shabbat morning. Okay, so that's how we'll do it. Okay, but there's no blessing because chametz doesn't become prohibited until the following day, until Saturday morning. So normally, right, if you just remember a normal year, it's been 2 years since we've had a normal year, you say the bracha at night and you collect your chametz and then you bring it the next morning, Erev Pesach, and you burn it following Shachrit in shul, and then you say the final declaration of I'm renouncing ownership of all the chametz totally. That's not appropriate this year on Friday because you have another day to use your chametz. So you don't say anything, you just burn, you say nothing, and that's going to be Friday this year. Okay. So when do we do? We know that's what I mentioned that already. So the annulling is Thursday night and Saturday. Okay, Saturday morning. Okay, so there's a day in between. Thursday night we say the annulment and the bracha and the annulment as we do our search, and then on Shabbat morning, right before the actual prohibition kicks in, that's when we make the final declaration that we are nullifying and rejecting all the chametz we might own. So the harder part. What do we do with eating our Shabbat meals? Okay, because Shabbat is not yet Pesach, and there's a mitzvah to have 3 meals on Shabbat, and how are we supposed to make that work? Okay, there's no Friday night, no prohibition on chametz. You have to have a Shabbos meal, and then on Shabbos day you also have to have a Shabbos meal. And there is a prohibition against eating chametz that kicks in the late morning, but you still have to fit in your Shabbos meals in the course of that day. Okay, so if you think you might oversleep on Shabbat, you nullify on Friday night. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's a good question. I don't know. Don't oversleep. It's like because you have to have your Shabbos lunch. Okay, so it's like there are other reasons why you have to wake up early on next Shabbos. Okay, it's you also have to have your Shabbos meal. Okay, so here's the deal: how do you have your Shabbos meal? Shabbos meal. One of the positive mitzvot of Shabbat is to eat 3 meals. These meals have to have challah, have to have bread. So Friday night, that's simple. I mean, it's not simple. It's there's no prohibition against eating bread Friday night, so you have your bread. The challenging piece Friday night is just it's a logistical challenge because what are you eating? Like where and how are you eating that bread? Your house has been cleaned for Pesach. You've cooked your food for that you're going to eat over Yontif. Using the kitchen's been turned over already. So how are you eating this? And on what are you eating this challah? So what right? Because you can't even wash your dishes, right? Even if you eat on your regular chametz stick plates, there's no easy way to wash them and store them, put them away, because your kitchen has already been turned over. So what is recommended is to have all of your food be Pesach food for that Shabbat meal. You're cooking it in your own Pesach kitchen that you've already prepared over the course of Friday. So your chicken or your vegetables or your fish or your soup is all kosher Pesach. And the only thing that isn't kosher Pesach is the bread they're having at the beginning of that meal with that meal. And you eat the meal on disposable plates, and then they all get disposed of without recontaminating the kitchen. Very careful not to eat crumbs, or maybe you eat, if it's possible, eat outside or at a picnic table or something, so that the crumbs don't contaminate your kitchen and your home. So the food that you're actually eating should be most likely Pesach food, but then the challah is regular challah. It doesn't have to be Pesach food. If you can eat takeout, if the timing works out that you have non-Pesach food, that's fine. But you're not going to have an easy way to clean any chametz things, because by the time Shabbos ends, Pesach will already begin. So another possibility could be, so just to make it explicit, why can't we just eat matzah then for this meal? Let's start Pesach a day earlier, and we use matzah in place of challah for our Yom Tov meals over Pesach. So why can't we just start eating matzah a day earlier? So the Talmud says we don't eat matzah before Pesach. The Talmud says it's we want the eating of that first Pesach at the seder night to be a really special experience, and so we can eat matzah throughout the year, but we stop eating matzah prior to Pesach, so that there's a real sense of specialness when we get to do so for a mitzvah purpose at the night of the seder. So we can't have matzah either. So that's also not an option. So it's recommended to have bread, certainly Friday night, and just to discard it carefully. And then flush down the toilet, you put it in the garbage. You can the garbage in your kitchen is probably not great, but if you put it in the garbage, you bring it out to wherever you dispose of garbage in your building. There's a dumpster outside in the street, that in the alleyway, that would be even better. That really doesn't belong to you anymore. It's like out of your possession. It's an interesting legal case. Can somebody somebody goes through your garbage? Do you have a right to privacy of your own garbage? I think it's like an interesting case for any lawyers on that. I don't know. Every so often I read about these cases. I think they're really interesting. You have a right to privacy with your own garbage, right? Somebody goes through the dumpster on your street and learns things about you. What rights do you have? So that's an interesting question. But in any event, basically you don't own the garbage anymore. You're not going to eat it anymore once you put it out for collection. Oh, we have a lawyer. Great, thank you. Okay, once you put it out for collection, it's fair game. Great. Okay, which means it's not your chametz anymore once you put it out for collection. So that's the best thing to do with whatever leftovers or chametz leftovers there are. Put it in the garbage and bring it outside your home. Lori said, so you can eat challah and then eat your Pesach dinner with Pesach utensils. No worry from crumbs in the mouth. Yes, that's right. The crumbs in your mouth are not going to contaminate the utensils. Your mouth is not hot enough. I wouldn't, whatever. Don't crumbs are dripping out of your mouth. Don't stick your Pesach spoon in right afterwards. But you can have challah at the beginning, and then if and then you maybe the challah course, then you put it away, and then you have your meal on your Pesach dishes. That's fine. You're supposed to have challah still left over on the table when you say Birkat Hamazon, but you can clear the table, clear all your Pesach dishes, and then put the challah back in its little plastic bag, and then say Birkat Hamazon, and then the crumbs, whatever's left, goes into the trash outside for the dumpster. Okay, so that's the really, really hard bit. Vinny asked about kitniot. Kitniot, right? Ashkenazim who don't eat kitniot on Pesach. Kitniot is like beans and corn and legumes and things like that. So there's an Ashkenazi minhag going back 1,000 years not to eat kitniot. Sephardim do eat kitniot because it isn't chametz. You could eat that also on Erev Pesach. I believe the custom though is to refrain from kitniot as soon as the chametz prohibition begins. So it doesn't actually. I don't think it saves you anything. I guess you could have it on. I mean, if you're worried about what am I going to eat, I don't know. You could have it on your, but this doesn't necessarily help you solve any of these problems. Rice too. Yes, rice. Yeah. Okay. I just saw it. Rabbi Abadi, the New Jersey rabbi with some eccentric kashrut positions, thinks that oats are really kitniot, which is perhaps scientifically correct, but a big disruption of how most of us treat oats, which is both strict and lenient. It's not so simple. So, okay. So shal shudis is the harder thing to square. Wait, somebody asked, can you use matzah as lechem mishnah? If not, you have to throw away the unused challah loaf or roll from Shabbos day. So there's a private quote, whatever. So that's, I just want to, I think you can use matzah as your lechem, but you don't necessarily have to throw out, because you could have two very small loaves of challah, right? So you're not wasting, and just eat both of them at your meal. And then all that's left is a few crumbs, which you can, flush down the toilet or throw in the garbage. You don't have to have it. Lechem mishnah, you're supposed to have two whole loaves to say hamotzi at any Yom Shabbos meal. It doesn't mean you have to only eat one of them. You can eat both of them, right? In theory, you can eat both of them. So maybe have really small little rolls and eat both of them, and then you're not wasting. But I think matzah could be, you wouldn't want to put you don't want to put you're supposed to, lechem is supposed to be together. So have a thing of matzah and a loaf of bread. Once they're touching there, under your challah cover, I wouldn't save that matzah for Pesach. I would, once it's been literally touching your bread, I would get rid of that matzah. So I'm not sure it saves you any, it doesn't solve any problems necessarily. I would go for the small loaves. And, normally, look, we don't like wasting food, and that's a very good and admirable thing, not to waste food, but it is a mitzvah to destroy chametz, right? So don't think of it as wasting food. Think of it as doing a mitzvah. Okay. I once, when our twins were young, there was one, I very distinctly remember one afternoon, they were in the bathroom and they were taking turns pulling tissues out of the tissue box. And they were just delighting themselves, pulling one after pulling the tissue out of the tissue box. And they were kind of making a blizzard of tissues, we're rising around them in the bathroom. And I think Sarah was like, oh my gosh, they're wasting tissues. No, they're not wasting tissues. They're using tissues to entertain themselves. And we're sitting and relaxing, and they were little two toddlers were just having a blast with these tissues. That wasn't wasteful at all. It was actually it's an alternative use, but it was definitely very much a non-wasteful use of the tissues. Okay. Shabbat is challenging. Shabbat, the mitzvah to have 3 meals on Shabbat. I mean, it's in a normal week, the third meal is sort of odd, because typically we don't necessarily we don't typically eat. We don't always eat a third meal if it's not Shabbos at the time of during the daylight, right? How do you fit in that third meal? There are Rishonim who say, there are important medieval scholars who say the third meal should be eaten in the afternoon. There are also scholars who say that the third meal should be with bread as well, just as Friday night and Shabbos lunch have to have 2 loaves of bread. So too, Shabbos, the third meal should also have bread. So if you combine those 2 positions together, there's really no way you can't have bread in the afternoon on this coming year. So one of those positions is going to have to be compromised. There's no way to square that circle. That's impossible. There's we learned today in Daf Yomi, there's a position that when you say Birkat Hamazon, whenever you say grace after meals, you should say it while holding a cup of wine or grape juice. Then you say Borei Pri Hagafen at the end, which we do this often at Shabbat meals or at large meals. But there's a position that's discussed in the Talmud that every time you say Birkat Hamazon, it requires a glass of wine. And there's another position that says that you have to say a full Birkat Hamazon every time you have wine or grape juice. And I think it's Tosafot who say that you can never combine those 2 positions, because then you would forever be saying Birkat Hamazon, Hagafen, Birkat Hamazon, for the rest of your life. You would never, get out of it. It'd be like a chain, So those 2 positions, they both exist, but you can't combine them. So here you have a paradox. You have a position that Shal Shudas requires bread, and you have a position that Shal Shudas has to be in the afternoon. And this coming week, a week from Shabbos, those 2 positions cannot be combined. And we can't have matzah for that third meal because we don't want to, matzah for the seder is, we want to be really special, not okay. So a couple of solutions. So one solution is to have your breakfast with challah early in the morning. We are going to have shachrit, our shul, early. I think we're starting, I forget what we said, 7:30. I think we're going to start pretty early. We'll be done by 9. You can be home by 9:30. Unless you live really far, and then you'll be home by 9:45. Okay, you'll have time to have your meal with bread before the prohibition against eating chametz kicks in. Okay, so that's all. That's all for early Shabbos morning. Then in the afternoon, once it's that great ideal Shabbos time, have a third meal that does not contain bread, and that is and that's great. So Carly's saying, when we say we can't eat matzah in Erev Pesach, does that include foods with matzah meal? No, it doesn't actually. It doesn't, and that's explicit, because the point is that you are trying to distinguish between the, matzah you might eat throughout the year and matzah that you're eating on Leil HaSeder, right, at the Seder, for the sake of this mitzvah. And so like a matzo ball or like like a matzo meal cake or something would not like no one's mistaking that for matzah. You'll be just as excited to eat matzah at the seder. Irene posted matzah shira. We'll get to matzah shira is matzah. Oh, this is Nathan. Okay, great. All right. Well, hi Nathan. Matzah shira. Which is we call like egg matzah, okay? Which is we'll see that's also a possible solution as well. We'll get there. Okay, so another possibility is to have 2 early morning lunches, and both of them with bread. I think we may try this. Okay, or maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. Like if you start your lunch at 9 and you have challah, emotzi and challah, and you eat for like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and you stop and you say birkat hamazon, and then you take a 20-minute break, and you have some seltzer, and then you wash and make a motzi again, have your third meal, and you have your 2 meals all during the morning. Okay, and that doesn't get you your afternoon shalosh. It does get you your 2 third meals with bread. Or you can have 2 third meals, one in the morning, and this is Maharami Rothenberg, who said, I just have 2 third meals, really 4 meals, and one in the afternoon without bread, and one in the morning with bread, and then you're fulfilling everyone's obligation. Matzah shir is another suggestion. We'll see how that's discussed. Okay, let's look at some sources for on this third meal problem, and then we'll move on to the next section. This is where the Shulchan Aruch discusses Shal Shudas. We're not going to read the whole thing. We'll read just a piece. What's the time for Shal Shudas? Right, so from 6.5 hours and onward, mincha time, that's when you should have Shal Shudas. So you shouldn't, and you're not having no Shal Shudas if you have in the mornings. That's the basic position of the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah here is a really cool thing about not drinking water late in the afternoon, because that's when the souls return. It's really interesting topic for another day, I think, about why we don't drink water late in the afternoon, but let's leave that for now. And if you look at in the 5th Seif, he writes, you have to have shalosh with bread. It doesn't have to be bread. It can be mizona. That's not going to help us on Erev Pesach, but just in general, you should know that. Things that are not like a staple, like bread or mizona, but things like that kind of, are less staples, but more things that accompany bread, like meat and fish, right? In the olden days, bread was it was like the main part of your meal, and it was the utensil at once. You would imagine pita meals that were based on big pita type loaves that you would dip into things. So things you dip into, bread, meat dishes or fish dishes, those are the secondary things to bread. But you could actually just eat those things as well, meat and fish, and that would be your shalosh. So the low, but not fruit. Okay. Even fish, even fruit. Fruit also is good. It can be a very small meal according to this position. So he says that really the best thing to do is to have shalosh with bread, unless you're just too full, which sometimes there have been weeks where it's a really short winter afternoon and you finish lunch at 3:30 and you finish mincha at 4:15 and you're I just finished a really, really big lunch. I can't wash and have a roll again. I just would feel gross doing so. So, okay, so have some shalosh that isn't bread, okay? And the Ramah says, so he says on the Ramah says, another occasion where it would be appropriate for shalosh not to have bread would be a year like this one, where Erev Pesach occurs on Shabbat, where you can't have your bread shalosh at the appropriate time. So it seems the Ramah is saying, I think pretty explicitly here in the source, that the time is more important. Better to have shalosh in the afternoon at the ideal time for shalosh and to compromise instead on what you're eating for your shalosh and to have meat, fish, fruit, something smaller. And let's see here in Hilchot Pesach. Let's see what he says here. Yudal Shechal Yot B'Shabbat. Look at this. This was a precedent. Okay, when the 14th of Nisan occurs on Shabbat, Bodkin Le'Elogeh, we search for chametz on the 13th, that's Thursday night this year. Umavarim B'Chol Lifnei Shabbat. Get rid of all the chametz before Shabbat starts. Burn it if you're going to burn. Umisharin Mezon Shnei Sudot, and leave food for 2 meals. L'tzorach Shabbat, the Suda Shlish. Okay, for the Shabbos meals. So Shlish Zmana Achar Mincha. You guys inu yachol lasota lo b'matzav lo b'chametz. Ela b'matzah ashira. Okay, so what does he say? So you leave bread behind for your Friday night dinner and your Shabbos morning lunch, but Shabbos you can't leave bread behind because once you get to the afternoon, you can't eat challah, you can't eat bread, and you can't eat matzah because it's Erev Pesach. So what do you use? You use matzah ashira. Matzah ashira is it's like it's like an oxymoron. It literally means like wealthy matzah. Matzah is supposed to be lechem oni, the bread of affliction, or the poor man's bread. Matzah ashira is like very wealthy matzah. It's made with eggs or with fruit juices, other ingredients besides flour and water. So it's not, you can't use it for the mitzvah of on Pesach, but you can use it for this Shal Shudas on Erev Pesach. So that's the Shulchan Aruch's position. That's the pretty mainstream Sephardic position where they think matzah shira is permissible to be eaten also during Pesach itself, but it's not usable for the mitzvah of eating matzah, and therefore on Erev Pesach it's a great solution because you can it doesn't ruin the excitement of eating matzah at the seder, but you can still, but it's not chametz. And the Rama adds, if we know it's elu, but in our lands, okay, Shulchan Aruch, of course, was representing the Sephardic Halakhic tradition, and Moshe Isserlis, writing in Krakow, offers the Ashkenazi gloss to make this a book a more universally relevant guide. He says, we know it's elu in our lands, meaning the Ashkenazi world, writing from Krakow. We don't eat matzah shira, as I've already explained. You should instead use fruit and meat and fish, as mentioned earlier. Okay, so he says we don't eat matzah shira, and so just have shal shudas with these other things, as I said earlier, and he does, as we saw that he says earlier. Okay, that's the Rama. Now, Aruch HaShulchan makes a very clever observation. The Aruch HaShulchan is Rabbi Yechiel Michal Epstein. Okay, so we're sort of moving forward in time. Just to give some orientation, right? We saw Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, they're writing in the 16th century. And Shulchan Aruch is writing from Tzfat in the Galilee, and the Ramah is writing from Krakow, all in the 16th century. Aruch HaShulchan is writing from Russia in the 19th and early 20th centuries. He dies in the 20th century. I think he wrote around the turn of the century, turn of the prior centuries when he's writing. And so he's summarizing earlier halachic material and providing practical guidance. And he was a community rabbi as well as a scholar. And so his work generally reflects what people did, okay? And as opposed to being sort of more ivory tower kind of halachic writing. So he says that when the Ramah says we don't eat, we don't use matzah ashira, he's not saying you can't use matzah ashira. He's saying, since Ashkenazim don't eat matzah ashira on Pesach, you can't buy it in the stores, right? Nobody makes it. And so it's not going to be a practical solution to this problem, right? You can't just be able to stroll down to the store and buy some egg matzah because we don't eat it during Pesach. And so there's not enough of a market. No one's going to go into the egg matzah business just every 20 years when Erev Pesach is on Shabbat to solve that problem. That's why he says you can use fish and all these other things. He says in here, we in our lands instead we use cooked matzah. Cooked matzah would be you soak matzah and then you grind it up. You make something out of matzah meal, maybe knedlach or something like that, or you soak the matzah and you let it dry so it still is in the shape of a matzah. And these are what these are what was done in Russia in his time. It's not suitable for the mitzvah, and so therefore it doesn't violate that. It doesn't ruin the excitement of having matzah at the seder. And that's what he suggests. He also says, he sort of notes, very clever, the Ramah here switches the order of fruit and fish from the order that appears in, when he talks about Shal Shudas, he says the preference is, fish and meat is better than fruits and vegetables. Here he says fruits and vegetables before he says fish and meat. So Aruch HaShulchan says, yeah, because we're really trying not to eat so much as Pesach is approaching. We want to be really hungry when the Seder begins so you can eat those mitzvah eatings with a great appetite. Okay. Questions, comments on what I've said so far? We are zooming along. Anything I left out? Feel like you have what you need to know to make a game plan for your for this coming Shabbat. Okay. If you think of it, please send questions as they come up. Okay. All right. So this happened. People remember the last time this happened, and when we had Pesach on Erev Pesach on Shabbat. I think it was 2007, last time it happened. 2008, that's right. 2000, thank you. It was 2008. It was Right, of course. It was 2008. Very good, Laura. And before that, it was Fast the Firstborn. Sorry, Fast the Firstborn is that. We'll talk about that. Actually, we'll talk about that. Yeah, we'll talk about that. You should have dinner. So yeah, that's very good. You eat out. That's very convenient. You don't have to worry about the dishes or cleaning anything. Yeah, eating out would be great. That's a yes. So it happens. It's going to happen again in I think 4 years. So maybe 4 years from now we'll eat out and have a shul dinner, a big crowded shul dinner. 80 of us crammed into Shlensky Hall, cheek to jowl. Then after that doesn't happen again for the 20 years. So it doesn't come evenly dispersed. So 2008 happened again I think in 2004. 2005, 2008, and then not since then. And then we have it again in a few years, and then not for 20 years after that. So it happened. It happened earlier in a very fateful year. Okay, and this is a story that is found. It's in both in the Palestinian Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud. It's in the Tosefta. We're going to look at just two versions of this story. This is the story of how Hillel, the famous Hillel, became prominent. And it all was because he knew what to do when Erev Pesach coincided with Shabbat. So here's the story. Tana Rabbanan is a Breita. Our sages taught a story. Halachazo nit alma mi b'nei B'tera. The b'nei B'tera, who were the religious leaders at the time, they forgot what to do. They didn't know this halakha. Pamachat chal arba asar liyot b'Shabbat. The 14th of Nisan was on Shabbat, just like it is this year. Shechachu v'lo yadu im Pesach docher Shabbat im lav. They didn't know what to do with the Korban Pesach, and didn't know what to do because Korban Pesach is normally brought. The Paschal sacrifice was brought on Erev Pesach on the 14th, and you eat it on the 15th with your seder. Okay, but that meant that all of the preparation, the shech, the bringing the Korban Pesach to the temple and slaughtering it and preparing it and then bringing it home and cooking it, all that was done on Erev Pesach. So how can that be done on Shabbat, or is that done on Shabbat or not? That was the question. So Amru Kulam Yeshadam Shiodei in Pesach Docher. So does the Pesach override Shabbat or not? Amru, they said Adam Echad Yesh Shala Bebava. There's a guy who just came to Eretz Yisrael from Babylonia, and his name is Hillel HaBavli, the Babylonian Hillel. He served the great scholars of the prior generation, Shemaiah and Avtalion. Like he came from Babylonia to Eretz Yisrael, where he served Shemaiah and Avtalion and studied from them, and he might know if you're day in Pesach, he knows if Pesach is Docher Shabbat or not. They called him, do you know im Pesach Docher Shabbat? And he said to them, so here's his answer. So that's the question. Okay, it's very sort of a very similar situation we find ourselves in, unusual confluence of the calendar, and we don't know what to do. Like our normal ways of preparing for Pesach involve bringing a sheep to the temple and slaughtering it and preparing it and then bringing it back and roasting it and eat. Right, all these things happen on Erev Pesach. Do we do that this year on Shabbat or not? So Hillel says, is there only one Pesach that overrides Shabbat? There are actually more than 200 Pesachs, as it were, that override Shabbat. What's he talking about? They said to him, what are you talking about? Okay. He said to them, the tamid was the daily sacrifice brought each morning in the temple and each afternoon in the temple. The Torah says regarding the Pesach, the Paschal sacrifice, and regarding the tamid, it says mo'ado, bring these sacrifices in their time. So it stands to reason, since we know that the bringing the daily sacrifice in the temple overrid the prohibitions of Shabbat. They brought it 365 days a year and a quarter. It overrides Shabbat. It says b'moado, bring it in its right time every single day. So it said that same word appears in the Torah's description of Pesach. It should further override Shabbat. Od Furthermore, he says, Kal v'chomer, it's a kal v'chomer, it's a logical argument. If you neglect to bring the daily sacrifice, there's no punishment, you don't get karet, your soul isn't cut off from the Jewish people, and yet nonetheless it overrides Shabbat. Pesach shanus karet, Shabbat. Pesach, which has this severe punishment, if you neglect the korban Pesach when you have the ability to bring it, you're punished with karet, whatever that means. But it's a very serious punishment. So what happens? Miyad hoshivuhu barosh. So immediately they were like, "Wow, this guy's really impressive. He knows the answer, and he was able to provide the answers." They put him in charge. Okay, they made him in charge, and he was like teaching, laws of Pesach all day long. Mikatran bidvarim. So what happened? He began to, they translate rebuke him. He began to sort of use harsh language. Amar lehem, migaram lechem she'aleh b'bava v'yen nasi alechem. Why is it? Aren't you embarrassed that I'm an immigrant from Babylonia and I'm in charge of you all? Aren't you embarrassed? What's the cause of that? This shame that an immigrant is in charge? You were lazy. You were not sufficiently diligent in serving the great Torah scholars of the prior generation. I had that, zeal of an immigrant. I came all the way to Eretz Yisrael to study from them, and I was really diligent, so I know the answer. So then he said to him, "Oh, all right." They took that rebuke. They said, "Okay, tell us then, Hillel, what if somebody forgot and didn't bring a knife with him to the Beis Hamikdash with his, how does he sacrifice? He can't carry the knife. What about that? Mahu, what about that? Amar lehan, halachazo, shamati v'shachachti. In other words, Hillel's like, oh gosh, I was rebuking you for not learning things and not knowing things, not remembering everything, and here's something that I myself forgot. So it's sort of his pride comes before a fall, as it were. He was overly haughty, overly arrogant, and he then in turn also forgot this law. But the Jews will figure it out. If they're not prophets, they're the children of prophets, and they'll know the right thing. Their ritual instinct will carry the day. Will give us tell us what to do. The next day, Misha Pischo Talat Chavob Samro. So what happened? If his goat was, if his Paschal sacrifice was a sheep, he stuck the knife in the wool and it sort of carried itself. And if the Paschal sacrifice was a goat, he stuck the knife like on the horn, so the goat would carry it on its own. He saw them doing this, and he said, "Oh yeah, yeah, this is exactly what Shmai Naftalion taught me, and everyone else preserved that knowledge, and they're doing it." This is the version. Okay, this is the version of the story. This is the rise of Hillel. He saves the day, comes to the rescue. No one knows what to do in a situation of Erev Pesach when Erev Pesach occurs on Shabbat. Nice little story. Look at the earlier version of the story as it's in the Tosefta, which it's not quite. It's a little more. It's not quite as it's more of a blunt version of the story, but it includes a little bit more of some of the tension. Okay, which is sort of hidden a little bit in the version of the Talmud. Tosefta is a Tannaitic work, so it's quite early, around the same time, more or less, as the Mishnah. This Babylonian Talmud text is is edited and put together in the Babylonian Talmud, let's say 300 or 400 years after the Tosefta. It's a much, much later version of the story. I'll read in English for time. Okay, it happened once that the 14th of Nisan coincided with Shabbat. They asked Hillel the elder, "Does the Paschal offering override Shabbat?" He replied, "Do we have?" Oops, sorry. I'm gonna make a little edit here. Real time. Do we have only a single Paschal offering during the course of the year which overrides Shabbat? We have many more than 300 Paschal offerings during the year. They all override Shabbat. All the people in the courtyard ganged up on him, meaning they're like, "What are you talking about? Okay, like this is ridiculous." He said to them, "The daily burnt offering, the Korban HaTamid, is a public offering, and the Paschal offering is a public offering, just as the daily offering is a public offering and overrides Shabbat. So too, the Paschal offering is a public offering and overrides Shabbat." So he gave them a logical proof to try to prove his point, and it seems and doesn't seem to have worked, right? He says it and then he has to go on. They don't accept him right away. Alternatively, regarding the daily offering, it says it's appointed time. And regarding the Paschal offering, it says it's appointed time, just the daily offering, regarding which it states it's appointed time. That's override Shabbat. So too the Pascal offering regarding which it states its appointed time override Shabbat. So the first is sort of like a logical analogy. There are these two korbanot are similar. So if we know one overrides Shabbat, the other one should too. The other one is a linguistic. It's called like a gezerah shava. The word b'moado in its time appears with both of these korbanot, and that's why it overrides. Nathan / I really say, isn't 52 not 365? Yeah, it's the Tamid overrides Shabbat about 52 times, but so that would be more precise, I guess. It override, but it's like a daily sacrifice. So we bring the Tamid 365 days a year, and it also overrides Shabbat. So you're right. So we have like the Tamid is very similar to the Korban Pesach, but it's brought 365 days a year. Some of those days, one out of every 7 days on average is a Shabbat. Okay, so but you're absolutely right. It's only overriding Shabbat on Shabbat. Then he goes and says, furthermore, there's an a fortiori, a kal v'chomer. There's a logical argument that can be made. If the daily offering on account of which the people are not liable to karet, that punishment overrides Shabbat. The Pascal offering on account of which the people are liable to karet is not logical that it too should override Shabbat. That's a lot. So he has 3 arguments. And none of them seem to work. The first is an analogy. The second is a verbal comparison, and the third is a kal v'chomer, a kind of logical proof that he brings. None of them seem to have an impact, like a direct, immediate impact. It seems that mode of halachic argument, that mode of midrash, really, of deriving halacha from the verses of the Torah, was not yet commonly accepted in Eretz Yisrael. Hillel maybe was more acculturated to that form of midrash, of halachic argument, of halachic reasoning from Babylonia. He's bringing it with him to Eretz Yisrael. He's deploying it, and it's not working. Okay, if this were a few generations later, if this is Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Kiva at the height of the Tannaitic position, there'd be midrashim of this kind flying back and forth. This would be very accepted. Hillel is several generations earlier, and they don't know what to do with him. He's making all these great arguments, and everyone crickets. Okay, like what are you talking about? Then he says, I've received a tradition from my masters that the Paschal offering overrides Shabbat, not only the first Passover, the second Passover, not only the communal Paschal offering, but even the communal Paschal offering. Then it seems that they listen, because then they ask, okay, like this seems to be accepted, because they then ask a further question: what will the people who did not bring their knives and Paschal lambs to the temple do? Right. So this last stage, when he says I have a tradition, then they accept that and they go on and say, okay, fine. What about knives? And he says, okay, they'll figure it out on their own, and that's what they did, right? They knew to arrange for the animals to carry without the people carrying themselves. So on that very day, they appointed Hillel as patriarch, and he instructed them the laws of Passover. So here he's elevated, he's promoted in the outcome of this display of all of these different sort of forms of argument. It seems though that like his initial attempts aren't quite they don't immediately embrace his initial attempts. It takes a little bit longer. And so it's only when he says he has tradition from his masters, from Shrine of Talion. And then also, I guess he also really impressed by him saying, oh, the people also know what to do. Their ritual instincts will also carry the day. That also seems to impress everyone. When it turned out, they appointed him to be the Nasi, to be the patriarch, the head of the yeshiva, of the academy. And that was, again, a very significant day. Hill, of course, had a very fruitful career. And also, it seems that all of these forms of halachic argumentation become part of the rabbinic toolkit in the classic period of Chazal, as they mine the verses of the Torah and discover all sorts of halachic meanings that we live by to this day. So this very fateful Erev Pesach that occurred on Shabbat really, for Hillel and for the rest of Jewish history, was really a turning point, a very, very significant event. Okay, I'm gonna look at one more source, then I want to sort of share some thoughts about this year. This is Truman Adish. Somebody asked about fast the firstborn, so this is discussed in this position. This is the Truman Adish was by what was his name? Rabbi Israelin, right? He was a medieval Ashkenazi posek, late medieval, I think, and And one famous thing about his book, he wrote his own questions. He wrote the, like they're sort of, at least that's, I think, the common assumption. At least I was taught. I was taught that he wrote his own questions. They're fake questions. Okay. Normally, when you have a collection of Sheilot Tshuvot, responsa literature, somebody asks a question, there's an answer given, it's published eventually. Like they're real questions from real people. It seems that he sort of used the question answer format to teach the halakha that he wanted to teach, and so he like wrote the questions himself. That's again, that was I was taught. I don't know if that's people still think that. So he says, Erev Pesach Chali b'Shabbat. So do we have this fast of the firstborn when Erev Pesach is on Shabbat? Normally, there's a custom of a thought experiment. Thank you. It's a heuristic, right? It's a heuristic, right? He didn't hear right. He didn't make up the questions. It was the thought experiment. Good. I just said like there's a certain people, the certain genres really like they're really good at certain genres, and you see this in rabbinic. Rashi. Rashi is like the master of the commentary, right? He uses, if he needs 5 words, he won't use 6, and if he needs 5 words, he won't use 4. He was just like a masterpiece in that genre. But he wrote Sheilot and Tshuvot, and they're just not as good. They're not as well written. Like they didn't catch on that same way. And likewise with the Ravid was really great at writing sharp critiques, but when he wrote his like longer essays, weren't quite as like well formulated as works of literature, right? There's certain genres that speak to certain people. So Shimon Adeshi knew he could like write Sheilot and Tshuvot. He didn't write a commentary and he didn't write a code. That's what he wrote anyway. So do you fast? So normally you fast on Erev Pesach. You can't fast on Shabbat. We were very reluctant to accommodate fasting on Shabbat. So do we fast or not? And if we do fast, which day? Maybe Friday, maybe if not Shabbat, do we fast on Friday or do we fast on Thursday? So he says, Yired mit'anin b'yom chamishi. So I think that we should fast on Thursday. That's prior to Shabbat, which is that is our practice. And I saw this b'yimei chorfai in my youth. I saw this in the Sefer Rokeach, another Ashkenazi, early Ashkenazi book. Shemati dechad mi Rav Avat. I saw this in one of my teachers, and I think it's the Maharil. I have the fancy version with the footnotes, which I think it's the Maharil. Again, it's early Ashkenazi collectors of minhagim and collections of Ashkenazi practice who he's quoting here. He wanted to prove that we don't fast at all from this fact that there's the Mordechai, another early Ashkenazi Rishon, in Masechet Pesachim writes that there's a dispute amongst the Amoraim recorded in the Yerushalmi, in the Palestinian Talmud, about why Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi fasted on Erev Pesach. Okay, we know that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi fasted on Erev Pesach. We don't know why. Did he fast? I'll switch to English. Okay, let's say it outside in the interest of time. One opinion is that he fasted because he was a firstborn, and so that's why they noticed that he fasted. The other opinion is that he fasted because he was very fastidious. Fastidious is not the right. He was very. He wasn't fastidious. He was very sensitive. He was an istinus. And so if he ate, he ate on Erev Pesach, he wouldn't be able to eat at the seder. We know actually Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, we know from other stories about him that he had stomach ailments. Okay, so he didn't eat on Erev Pesach so that he would be able to eat at the seder. So that's a dispute. So okay, now if we are maintaining the one who is of the opinion that he would fast as a firstborn, even if Erev Pesach was Shabbat, how could there be a dispute about the cause of his fast? Just resolve it from the situation when Erev Pesach occurred on Shabbat. If he fasted the day before, for surely he would not fast on Shabbat. If so, certainly his fasts were because he was a firstborn. You get it, right? If Yehuda Hanassi fasted on let's say Friday or a Thursday, when Pesach started Saturday night, surely the only reason for his fast would be that he was firstborn. Because if he's just fasting to be hungry on Leil Seder, on the Seder night, it's like too early. He's fasting Thursday, Friday. That wouldn't work. So this dispute wouldn't really, would never occur if it was the case that that they fasted on these years. And if he normally fasted because he was sensitive, what help would occur if he fasted the day before Erev Pesach, right? And he And if he would not fast on the day before Erev Pesach, we could resolve the opposite, right? If we would see he wouldn't fast, so it must be that he's not a firstborn. The only reason why he fasted in normal years was because of his sensitive stomach. Unless it's the case that according to the one who thought he fasted as a firstborn would also maintain that there is no fast of the firstborn when Erev Pesach is on Shabbat, and then we can't learn anything from his practice on a year. Like we see him not fasting when Erev Pesach is on Shabbat, not fasting on Thursday or Friday, and so, but we couldn't learn anything from that. And since the dispute exists, it must be that that's the case. Okay, if you can't follow fully, that's okay. It's complicated. Don't worry about it too much. You can go back and study it on your own. But this can be pushed off. This attempt to proof can be pushed off because it could be that the Amoraim did not know how he acted when Erev Pesach occurred on Shabbat. And okay, maybe they didn't know. Like maybe they saw him fasting on a normal year, and maybe 19 normal years in a row. They just didn't know what he did when Erev Pesach occurs on Shabbat. After all, the B'nai B'Teira, they were Nesi'im. They forgot what to do regarding the Korban Pesach when Erev Pesach was on Shabbat. How could they forget something that occurred in earlier years, if not for the fact that for many years it never happened that Erev Pesach was on Shabbat? And so they forgot, even though it concerned a public matter. Even the more so, these Amoraim wouldn't know if it concerned one individual alone. So what he's saying here, I think I'm gonna stop screen share. Okay, you all have the link. You can follow. You can look at this. You can look at this on your own. What the Truman Hadeshin is saying is that it was extremely rare for Erev Pesach to occur on Shabbat, even more rare than it is for us. For us, it's whatever. It's like every, it's, I don't know, like we have one this year, we have one in 4 or 5 years, we have another one 20 years from then, so it's like it clumps together. You could have a stretch of 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years, I don't know. But it's not a huge duration. So, but before we had a fixed calendar, it could have been much longer duration. And there are even some Rishonim who say that what B'nai B'Teira forgot was that you're supposed to manipulate the calendar so that this doesn't happen. Okay, with our fixed calendar, we manipulate our calendar. Okay, 10% of yours, very good. Okay, we manipulate our calendar. We have a rule, famous rule, Lo Adu Rosh. The first day of Rosh Hashanah never occurs on a Sunday, Wednesday, or Friday. And we push off Rosh Hashanah from the day that it should be astronomically, based on when the moon is expected to appear, so that it would never occur on a Sunday, Wednesday, Friday. That's a rule that we have even within our fixed calendar. Before we had a fixed calendar and they were waiting for witnesses to appear, there were like further tricks that were possible for manipulating things. And maybe what B'nai B'Teira forgot was that you're supposed to manipulate the calendar so that Erev Pesach never occurs. And just like we can't have Simchas Torah on Shabbos, you can't have Erev Pesach on Shabbos. And in our calendar, Simchas Torah is never on Shabbos. In their calendar, you would never, and Yom Kippur is never on a Saturday night, right? So too, in their calendar, maybe Erev Pesach was not supposed to be on Shabbat. That's what B'nai B'Teira forgot. That's what or it could be that just since the calendar was not fixed. For us, it's 10%. They come in groups. Maybe for them, it was less than 10%, or maybe it was 10 or 20%, but they were longer durations and stretches between Erev Pesach occurring on Shabbat, and that's why they forgot. The point is, so there's different opinions among the Rishonim as to that. For the practical question, our custom is to fast on Thursday, or our custom is to not fast. Our custom is to get out of fasting through one means or another on Thursday rather than Friday or Shabbos. Okay. But I just want to circle back to this idea of a rare confluence of the calendar, and the result being that B'nai B'Teira didn't quite know what to do, because that to me is a very evocative situation of what we've experienced, and I think what we're going to experience on Pesach, and also in the weeks and months that follow Pesach. As we all know, we've had a significant disruption in our religious lives this past year. Pesach last year was sort of right in the thick of it, as we were really going into the most severe lockdowns that we are shelter in place regimes that we've experienced. And we had to reinvent Pesach for circumstances that were really different than normal circumstances in terms of eating, meals by ourselves and the seder by ourselves, and this different foods than we would normally eat, and what prayers can we say at home with a minyan, without a minyan, that we would normally say in shul. in shul with a minyan. And and that was, that was disruptive, right? Just like just like B'nai B'Tera. It's like, oh my god, we have this Torah that we've been following for a really long time, but all of a sudden, like, well, how do we do this? We don't really know what to do. We're sort of thrown a curveball, just as B'nai B'Tera were thrown a curveball in for the first time in their lived experience, or the first time in their memory, they didn't know how to accommodate Erev Pesach coinciding with Shabbat. Actually, honestly, I would say even things that happen for myself, even things that happen every single year, I often forget, how do we do this again? What do you do? You like HaGadol before, after Havdalah? What's the thing? So okay, fine. But they had, our memories maybe are not quite as good. But but the point is, life sometimes throws a curveball, even when you've been diligently practicing and engaged in Torah and mitzvah year after year after year. Sometimes you're confronted with something new. And I think you've also been partially guided a little bit by that, the prophetic spirit of the Jewish people kind of carrying the day and helping us answer the questions that even Hillel couldn't answer. People figured out on their own how to do things in the right way. Now we're in, thank God, a very different circumstance. I really believe we're in hopefully we're in a very different set of circumstances. Okay, I think there's there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and not only is there a light at the end of the tunnel, there's also a tunnel. Okay, we can see better days ahead, and we know the process to reach those better. Right? It's the answer is precautions until vaccination, until everyone's vaccinated. Okay, we know that. We even know more or less when. We hope that these things are going to be much better. I think though we have to learn again. We have to learn anew how to reconstitute our communities. I've had a number of conversations with colleagues serving, synagogues that are similar to ours and synagogues that are very different from ours, and synagogues that are in between, how similar they are to ours and different they are to ours in terms of the community and their background and their religious orientation. And I think everyone, we all have to rebuild our communities, I think almost from the ground up, because we've forgotten how to wake up on Shabbos morning and grab our kids and go to shul. We've forgotten how to fit it. Fitting in Shalosh Shudas on Erev Pesach, that's kind of challenging. But actually, even on a normal week, fitting in Shalosh Shudas, how do we do that? I had the experience of walking with my family to shul on Shabbat before Purim to hear Zachor. Okay, I heard it in the morning. Sarah had not heard it in the morning. She was going to hear it in the afternoon. I was walking with her and the kids so they could hear them, but I was going to be with Yonatan while I was like, wow, we used to do this all that. We used to go to shul as a family, and we used to juggle children and being in shul in the morning and in the afternoon, that's exhausting. And we do this every week. So we've forgotten. Okay, it's not gonna our community's not gonna bounce back the way it was before. Every piece has to be intentionally built back, brick by brick by brick, until we have a community that we want, maybe and hopefully better than what we had before. But nothing's going to happen automatically. All of our shuls, every synagogue is a startup synagogue. Okay, because people are going to have to decide for themselves that they feel comfortable regathering for in-person activities, and many people who have been vaccinated for weeks are not yet ready, and it's going to take some psychological process of feeling ready. And then it's going to have to be, people have to be retrained or re-enticed, re-invited to then make communal synagogue life the center of their religious and social lives as it was, 13 months ago. It's not going to spring back. For some people, maybe it will. I think for most of us, it won't. And so we're not going to no, we're not going to have this memory anymore. We've lost that muscle memory of wake up early Shabbos morning, wake the kids, get them dressed, get them in, get them in the Shabbos clothes. My kids don't have Shabbos clothes that fit them anymore. Okay, we have to get the, we're going to have to recreate all of those, retrain ourselves. Okay, relearn how to act, just as Hillel taught the B'nai B'Tera. Okay, let's combine logic and close reading of psukim and traditions from before, and also that prophetic spirit of the Jewish people that comes through for us also at the end when nothing else will, that guides us, because we're not prophets, but we're the children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren of prophets, and sometimes that prophetic spirit also can give us guidance and help us resolve and figure out how to do things when when nothing else will. So that's I think the agenda ahead of us. I'm over an hour, 3 minutes over. It's okay. So any unresolved questions? I spoke for an hour. If you have to go, you should go and respect your time. I want to just sort of look over the unresolved questions. Similarly, but also importantly, anyone else terrified to eat in front of anyone? Yes, it's like very eating is scary, right? Marilyn talks to 2 people since COVID, don't feel like any shul. We have to try to get them back. Yes, we do. Yes. Okay, they can come to us. Okay, when they're ready. The shul bulletin says fast for the firstborn, but for firstborn children, isn't the firstborn sons? Not. It's actually some machloket. Some say firstborn sons. Some say firstborn daughters. That's a dispute. So I would say why not be strict and don't just listen to a siyum, learn some Torah. Don't fast. Nobody should fast. Okay, you should join a siyum, learn some Torah or some other sudat mitzvah, some other occasion or celebration to get out of the fast. I once made the mistake of fasting in Erev Pesach. It was a big mistake. We flew to cousins in Florida, and so we got up really early and left town before I got to go to a siyum at the shul. And so we got there, and everyone is sitting by the pool and eating and drinking, and I was not enjoying myself as much. Can you say that? Yes, you can. Yes, you can say at the end of Masechet Pesachim. Oh yes, basic etiquette. Yeah, no, I understand. You're right. Sorry. Yeah, yes, that's what I meant actually. Like people are gonna look at you. You have to use a napkin. It's like very. You have to wear pants again, right? It's a lot of things we have to relearn how to do. Somebody asked me privately for Ashkenazim who don't eat matzah, shira, egg matzah. When does that practice start? Is it when we don't eat chametz or kitniot, or is it right when Pesach? I don't remember actually. So I will write. I will. I think I remember, but I'm not going to say the answer without double checking. So I will double check and get back to you about that. Does Zoom count for a siyum? Yes, I think Zoom does count for a siyum. We are going to broadcast the siyum on Thursday morning from the shul, and I believe it does count. I mean, again, because it's a very it's just not pleasant to fast on. We don't want people to fast. It's this is a fast that's not mentioned in the Talmud. It develops much later in Jewish history, and so we're pretty lenient in ways to get out of it. Especially this year, it's not even Erev Pesach. It's not even the day before Erev Pesach. It's the day before Erev Pesach. So, do anything to get out of it. And even a Zoom. In fact, even before COVID, we used to broadcast over telephone or Zoom for people who were traveling in Erev Pesach. So it's an old tradition. Okay. Any other questions that you think of later, please email me or call. And the sooner you ask, the sooner I have time to research and find out the answer. Some of you have sent to me offline questions I will try to circle back and respond to. Okay. So thank you so much. And looking forward to, I guess, being with you for Shabbat and being with you for Pesach, and then all the alumni who joined, really, really happy to welcome back. It's really great. Hope you'll be able to visit in real life at some point, but in the interim, it's really great that you're joining us remotely. So you should always feel part of welcome at our shul, indoor, outdoor. Will there be indoor, outdoor diving? On Yontif, we're going to have outdoor diving, weather permitting, if the weather permits. Okay, I'm going to end the call now, but follow up with your messages as you went. Okay, take care, everyone. Good night.